There we go. Well, we will kind of get things started here, but we'll allow people as they join. Thank you everybody for taking some time out of your day here and jumping in, and we're going to break down Windows 10 end of life and kind of give some tips and tricks to maximize your IT budget. As always, I'm joined with Michael Fink and Darrell Middleton, and yeah, we promised this thing would be done in 15 minutes, so we're just going to jump right in. And with that, Darrell, if you want to take it away.
All right. This is a little bit different setting for me. You can't tell by my background, but I am actually here in North Dakota, in office with Mike Fink. Mike Fink, tell me about this weather. What is going on here? I don't like it at all.
You brought it with.
Yeah. So
I mean, it was
right.
nice till you got here.
Basically, it was gorgeous until you showed up, Rel, and now it's been raining ever since you got here. So I might not get invited back.
Yeah, I thought I was flying to Bismarck, and here I am in Seattle. All right, Mike, let's talk about this. We see that costs are rising for these IT purchases. We see it every day. A lot of this has to do with Windows 11 coming up, where if you're using a Microsoft-based PC or a laptop, man, you got to do something about that. Can you tell us more about that, Mike, and how it's affecting inventory?
Yeah, so there's a handful of things that are all kind of fitting together at the wrong time when it comes to hardware and expense in your business. Windows 10 end of life is coming up here in October. So, less than, 5 months from now, all the Windows 10 computers that are out there that cannot be upgraded to Windows 11 are going to be a vulnerability on your business network. So it's something that needs to be addressed before that time frame. And as we get closer and closer to that date, what we're seeing is demand for computers is rising. And that demand is causing prices to go up because there's only so much supply. And when everybody in the entire world all has a deadline of October to replace certain computers, it causes undue pressure in the marketplace. So that's kind of the first thing that is really kind of driving that, is that end of life, Windows 10 end of life coming up here in October. Right. And when you think about it, the last time that something like this happened with the Windows operating system was the Windows 7 end of life date. And when that happened, what you saw prices spike as it got closer to that time. And it got to the point where supply wasn't even available. So everything jumped significantly, and there wasn't enough computers available for everybody who wanted them. So that is a concern as well.
Especially nowadays when you're looking at the processing capability that needs to be in that computer and the memory and things like that. So a lot of these different computers need specialized chips to be able to run Windows 11. The demand on that PC is a lot greater than it was from 7 to 8, for example.
Right.
And it doesn't help that you're out here selling every single piece of equipment in the world, Mike, right? So that your sales were pretty up last month. So inside joke. And then you got the world global economy and different things there. Without pivoting too hard to politics, we do have some economic uncertainty that's affecting demand.
We'll definitely stay politics neutral here. But the bottom line is that with all the trade agreements and tariffs and things that are all up in the air, and nobody knows what's going to happen from day to day, that's also causing potential for prices to increase. If there are tariffs on hardware or computer parts or specific things, that is the second factor. And we talked about increased demand already. So those are kind of the three factors that are all happening in conjunction to push prices up right now. And it's creating a situation where, there's just not the same supply. I can
chime in on this one. What was going on with tariffs that were really screwing up our ability to get product and then get it in front of clients. And I'm Dan, by the way, CEO of Silicon Plains. I jumped in on this webinar. Normally I don't, but I had time today, and I love talking to these guys. But what happened with supply, our suppliers, the people who sell us computers and get them straight from overseas or whatever and put it on the shelf at their warehouse, told us during one of the tariff threat timeframes that their quotes were instantly only good for 24 hours, which made it a
That's
real
right.
real pain in the butt for our clients and us, because we were constantly having to quote and requote and requote and requote. We also see that whenever a tariff thing hits the news, all of a sudden stock will go to zero. People are trying to grab this stuff before the prices jump. And so it's a horrible time to try to get the right kind of equipment into the hands of clients, which is why we're trying to stay on top of it.
Yep. And that's leads to the third point too. You had this, you have a cybersecurity needs and threats. How is that affecting the supply chain?
Right. So, and we talked about it a little bit, but you look at Windows 7, when Windows 10 when they're no longer doing patches and updates on Windows 10 for security updates, even critical updates, what we typically see is we see attackers of all different types, hackers and whatnot, that are pausing their attacks until just after that last patch, so that Microsoft doesn't have an opportunity to include it in that last patch update. And then it's a free-for-all. So it's super important to make sure that end-of-life equipment is removed from your network before it becomes a issue for all of your entire network.
Yep, it's a really good point.
Absolutely. Yeah, as we transition here to this next slide, just one thing I forgot to mention. If you guys have any questions, drop them in the Q&A. I'm monitoring that as we go. I put a message in there so everybody knows where it is. But if you have questions, we'll fit them in where we can or address them at the end here. So just a little note there as we continue.
So with this, so the prices are going up, right? And the demand is being affecting the price line. How can businesses save on money? We know we have to purchase these products. How can these businesses save?
Right. So there's a handful of different things that you can do here. For example, a lot of people are using Microsoft products, and sometimes they don't even realize what's all included in the Microsoft product suite that they have. So if you take advantage of things that are already included in some of those subscriptions you already have, like, for example, SharePoint, which is included with Microsoft 365, there's a lot of times that we're able to reduce the need for a company even to have a server on site anymore by moving files and shares that the company needs to have access to a product like SharePoint that's already included in their Microsoft licensing. Yep. So things like that can definitely be useful as you're going around and you're looking at your budget and how things are happening in your business and what the economy is doing and all of that kind of stuff, and you're trying to fit these technology upgrades that are needed in. Let's try to find some ways that we can use things that are already there in place rather than buying new things if we don't have to.
Yeah, to your point, I had one of the counties take a look at their overall telecom costs, including their phone bill, right? And so they were able to save quite a bit of money on their monthly telephone bill by switching over to, let's say, VoIP or using Teams to reduce their bill so that they can free up that revenue to go ahead and purchase the equipment that they need. What about these? You're talking about reduced redundancies. What about the expensive break and fix? If you have an old equipment and you're constantly repairing it, that's an additional cost.
Sure. So a couple of things there. First off, when you're looking through what you're spending on IT, look at the things that don't need to be there. If there's licenses that aren't being used or licenses that are still there for people that haven't been part of the company, and whoever is managing that for you, make sure you're having those conversations. So if it's us that you work with, we would be having those conversations on a regular basis and looking at what you have in place for Microsoft licensing or other licensing to make sure that you're not paying for things that you're not using. When you get to older equipment, it breaks more. It's just like anything else. And if you're paying on an hourly rate for people to put out fires, if you will, or break things that get broke or fix things that get broken, what can happen is you can see a month where those costs skyrocket versus having a flat rate program in place where a lot of those things are included and you have a more stable budget number for you.
Yeah, I guess the point of the call is to upgrade now, to your point, right? And there's a urgency, like you say, with the zero date coming in October, but I don't have the money right now. I know this isn't on our slide, but there are companies that help finance hardware. So instead of going and waiting until you have the money, and then the supply is even less. Now is the time to upgrade, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, there are definitely options out there if budget is a concern, that we can stretch it out over a longer period of time. That's and right. Help people get what they need today so they're still protected and it doesn't cost more money in the long run. So
perfect.
All right. And as far as when you're looking for hardware, there's a lot of times that you see people that don't know, hey, what's the right computer to buy and how do I determine what that is? And really when you're looking at purchasing hardware, you want to look at a couple of different factors. If you're doing it yourself or if you work with us, these are the factors that we're looking at. The first thing we're going to look at is we're going to look at a life cycle. So the Windows 10 date kind of messes with the life cycle a little bit, but if you're on a consistent life cycle, then things like this don't come up where you have to replace big numbers at a time. We can spread it out over time. So determine how long you want to keep your computers in your business. So
a lot of recommend for that, Mike.
Yeah. So, and it depends a little bit on the business, but there are a lot of times that people will look at a 3-year, a 4-year, or a 5-year life cycle replacement. And what you want to do is you just want to make sure that you have something in place so that it isn't this huge bill that dumps on you at the absolute worst time, because that's always when it happens.
Right. I think on average, just to fill that in real quick, if we're going to give people just some basic facts and figures that we see in the industry that they should be using, if they're the type of company that wants to budget ahead for expenses in IT, you need to take the number of computers you have, if it's 10 computers or whatever it happens to be, workstations, not servers and not stuff in the cloud. These are just PCs at desks, and plan on replacing 25% of those if you've got a 4-year, as an example, replacement cycle. And the reason for that being, you're planning ahead and you can say, okay, we're going to be spending roughly $1,000 for an average workstation or computer. It's an easy budget number to set, and it's doable for the kind of computers that we see on average sitting at a desk in a typical business. So 4-year replacement cycle would be pretty reasonable. It's a little fast. You might stretch it out to 5, maybe even 6, which in our estimation is a little bit too far. But some companies really want to be super budget conscious and they don't want a replacement cycle that's going to put them in some sort of a money crunch. So take that and be replacing a quarter or whatever the number is. If it's 6, it's 1/6 of your computers each year. And just replace the oldest ones. Don't replace the ones from the people who are the noisiest.
And then avoid PC and or laptop envy.
Absolutely.
You try to keep your hardware consistent across the board as well.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say on this, and I won't try to burn up a bunch of the time, but the other piece to look at from an individual standpoint. So when it comes to people, because we're not talking about just hardware in this conversation, it's budgeting for IT expenses. And yeah, hardware is going to be a screwy year this year, big time. And so try to get the purchases in sooner, because it's just going to get worse as time goes on. Nothing we can do about it. It's kind of a warning flag for everybody out there. But when it comes to the individual sitting at a desk in a company and you're thinking, what is the IT spend so I can budget for things like support, licensing, and other things outside of the hardware. And this would be cloud services as well. This is all rolled into a single number. Look at around $150 per person. So inside your company, you have 10 people, $1,500 a month is not crazy numbers. It's not crazy money to be spending per person. And if you're not spending it, maybe they don't need the computers as much. Maybe it's a team that they're driving around outside. They don't need the computer. They don't have an office. They don't have a desk. Maybe they've got a computer. They'll never use it, whatever. But a typical office user, I would say a basement number would be around $150 a month for the support and licensing for that individual person. each month. Would you guys agree?
Yeah, I think that that's definitely, and you see that some variance in that number. You know, I've seen companies that are spending as much as twice that, but you know,
and they're
I think,
companies where they're more heavily reliant on technology.
absolutely.
You know, and when we say that, we mean, you know, they've got a EHR, like an electronic health record program, and it's really expensive. They've got, you know, high needs when it comes to graphics and processing, like a architectural drafting firm where they're using AutoCAD a ton. So their computers are, you know, expensive and so on, and they have a lot of support. So you move the lever left and right a little bit, but 150 bucks a person per month for support and licensing, and replacing uh, computers on a cycle is fantastic. I think it's going to give you the number that you should be spending, and you'll be in range with what we see.
Couldn't agree more, Dan.
Yeah, the next thing that we see is we see people buying either a computer that is way too big or way too small from a processing standpoint for what that computer needs to do. So when you think about it, you know, if you have your, you know, we try to break things down into different levels. So your business class computer should handle most business class type functions. When you look at an executive level computer, they might be doing something more like QuickBooks related or something like that. So what we see all too often is we see clients or prospects going out there and they buy the biggest, bestest computer that they can find on the market, or they buy the cheapest computer that they can find at Best Buy. And both of those things cause different problems. So you're spending too much on too big a computer, then that's resources that could be allocated to your business in different ways within your IT budget or within other budgets within your company in order to make things more efficient. And you're not utilizing the power that computer has. On the too small side, and we see this even more often, is you buy a computer that isn't quite up to snuff. And what happens is you have to replace them more quickly. So now instead of a 3 or a 4 or 5 year life cycle, you're talking 1 or 2 years. And you've seen this, I know everybody has, where the computer kind of bogs down. That's because the computer that you bought, you know, wasn't quite the right computer for what the business use was.
Yeah, and that's when you get a customer saying that they'd rather just use their cell phone. And so
right. And the third item here, and we're a couple minutes over, so I want to get to this quick, is the workload. And when you're thinking about the workload that a computer is going to do, you can't think about the workload that it's going to do today. You need to be thinking about that life cycle in relation to that workload. So if you're on a 3-year life cycle, you need to think, okay, what is the workload this computer is going to need to be able to handle in 3 years? And that's the computer you buy, one that can handle that workload 3 years from now. Same thing if it's a 4-year or 5-year life cycle. You want to make sure you're buying a computer that can handle what you need that computer to do for that entire life cycle before it needs to be replaced again.
And we get the question all the time with businesses where they say, why wouldn't I just go to Best Buy and pick up whatever I want or get the cheapest thing or the thing that I think seems like the appropriate thing for my company off of Amazon.com or whatever. The advantage in going to your IT company, like a business like us or somebody who's in the know, is that they know where to get business class computers. Most of the stuff that's being sold, Walmart, Best Buy, Amazon, like I mentioned, are not business class computers. They're for people who want to screw around, have a home office, use it sometimes. They're not workhorses. On top of that, it's likely that they're not sized right for the business, and so you're going to end up with something that, like Mike mentioned, is slow. It's not often that we see computers that are, you know, super overpowered because they start looking like gaming computers with lots of LED lights and big fans. But what we do see really often is you go buy them from someplace else, kind of basing it on price alone or availability. I can just go across the street and go get some, and it ends up being too slow of a computer or loaded up with a bunch of junk that you don't want.
We see a lot of that too.
Well, we appreciate the special guest from Dan as well, by the way. So your insight on this is pretty knowledgeable, and I appreciate you, Michael Fink. And take it away, Damien.
Yeah, perfect. Well, a little bit longer than 15 minutes, but if you have any questions, we've got a couple that were submitted ahead of time, but raise your hand and we can unmute you. You can ask the guys, or you can always drop it in the Q&A. As we kind of, wait for those to see if there's anything that comes from that. Just a reminder, our next webinar, Thursday, June 19th at 3 o'clock Central. We're going to use how to use AI. We're going to do tools, tips, all kinds of tricks, things we use here, what we've kind of seen as best practices go from our clients. And yeah, don't miss that out. And if you got any questions or want to maybe have a more in-depth conversation with these guys on maximizing your IT budget, scan the QR code there and just pick a time, and we'll chat with you. As we kind of wait and see if there are any questions that come up here, I did have a couple that was submitted ahead of time. One of them was just something that kind of crossed my mind as you guys were going, that we see a little bit, but just kind of open to the group here. How much of a difference do you guys think ultra core processors is going to make as far as price goes in raising the overall cost of hardware? It's something that we've seen kind of get introduced slowly over the last 6 months, maybe. I mean, do you guys think that's going to be something that raises the cost kind of generally, or what do you think that's going to do? Dan, looks like you're shaking your head a little bit.
Not going to make any difference whatsoever. PCs are going to stay. So the average business PC is anywhere from $800 for kind of a slower, low needs kind of computer to as much as you want to spend. $1,500, $2,000 is getting pretty eccentric when it comes to how much you're spending on PCs. But a different price. I mean, if anybody on the call is old enough to remember the processor wars back in the 80s and 90s, when you had the Intel Pentium and you had the 486s and you had AMD and you had Intel and you had all these businesses that were trying to compete for the latest, greatest, fastest thing. There's almost nothing from a processor standpoint anymore that doesn't have the power to do exactly what you're going to need to do. So it's very, very hard to find slow processors. What's going on in the industry is they're trying to make processors cheaper to manufacture. And so these ultra core things are a change in the manufacturing process. And they're trying to get out there first and say ours runs, and it burns less coal and, makes less noise and runs less heat. It's not so much that it has any kind of an effect on the end user or the price.
Okay. Perfect.
I did get a question here too. The question is there anything that we can do to extend the life cycle within those parameters? Not really the way the question was asked. That's the general idea. Anyway, and the answer to that is, you can look at making sure that the maintenance items that are done on that computer are done in a timely manner. Those Windows patches and updates and different things like that. Make sure that those are getting done on time and keeping up to speed. And then it falls back to where you got the computer from, and make sure that the computer that you're buying is the right kind of computer and isn't a consumer grade computer that is full of a bunch of software that you're never going to use that bogs it down.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I've got some tips and tricks for this too from back in my days when I used to take care of computers at a college campus, and you'd walk into a typical lab and you would see 30, 40, 50 workstations sitting on a carpeted floor. You want to extend the life of a computer, get it off the floor. No workstation should be sitting on the carpet. It just sits there and sucks up dirt. Normally a person would be like, well, I can go blow it out every once in a while, grab some compressed air, take the cover off, and I'm good to go. That dirt gets stuck in so many things inside the machine that eventually it can't keep itself cool, and heat reduces the life cycle of a computer, period. You can do lots of updates, and those are important because you want the computer to continue to run. You want Windows to not be a big mess and tell you, I don't have enough updates, so I can't install this piece of software you want. But mostly you're trying to keep heat out of the computer, and that starts with dirt. So get the computer off the floor, put it up on the desk, and like Mike mentioned, get those maintenance items done. It does need to be blown out every once in a while. Every computer we sell has a fan in it, unfortunately. And so it's just sitting there being its own little self-killing vacuum. And eventually it does clog up, and heat will ruin the computer. And that's when you start seeing weird stuff. Everybody's familiar with the blue screen of death. We've all seen that. That's a lot of times where that comes from. Something gets too hot, the computer just doesn't know what to do anymore. It scrambles its brain, and you get a blue screen. So keep them clean, get them off the floor.
Okay, perfect. Well, next question that we got, kind of playing off that life cycle question, we used the kind of phrase 3 to 5 year life cycle quite a bit earlier. Kind of explain a little bit, if you guys don't mind, just a little bit more into why is there that 3 to 5 year life cycle? Obviously, there are warranty considerations, right? A lot of times you start getting into that year 3, year 4. But kind of break down a little bit, what does that look like?
The old man in me says it's planned obsolescence.
Planned obsolescence. I knew you were going to say that. Let's say it together.
And I'm not going to say that's true. It's true.
Yeah.
But in reality, I mean, you have machines that the technology develops, and it leaves your computer that you bought in the dust. Just like video game consoles, there's PlayStation 1 and the 2 and 3, and one, you can't play games from a 1 on a 3 and whatever. It's the same concept, that the technology advances, and it advances on a fairly predictable time frame. So you see I want to keep the computer running, and I want to make it run as long as it possibly can, because I want to keep that cash in the company for other things. That makes sense. Well, there's stuff that's totally out of our control. And one of them is the idea that you were mentioning earlier, Damien, the processor change. If that processor changes, I guarantee you Windows is going to change and follow suit along with it, along with whatever else software, and they're going to take advantage of these new things that this processor does. And eventually they're just going to stop updating the old stuff. Or when it does have a problem, they won't fix it. And that's the kind of stuff where the computer is working perfectly fine, but it is obsolete just because it got old, or the technology outpaced it.
I got a question too, to kind of piggyback off on that. What about the proper use of storing data? If you're an old school guy like me, you want to always keep storing it on your local PC. Could that also bog down the processing power, or excuse me, the performance of your PC?
So my favorite analogy with this is, remember back in the day when all your contacts used to be on your cell phone and they weren't backed up, and if you dropped your phone and broke it, all your contacts were gone? Those contacts didn't go someplace magical. They're in the cloud. They're stored on Verizon stuff, or whoever you have for a service provider. It's easy. So I would say that, most of the people on the call and going to be watching the webinar are watching from a Windows computer. Super easy to turn on OneDrive. And if it's not on, shame on you. I mean, turn that stuff on, because it's magical. You turn it on, My Documents, and a few other folders get backed up automatically, and you get old versions of the file if you want to go back and find them. So you maybe updated it 3-4 times, realized you deleted a whole section 3 times ago. You can go get it yourself. That's one of the best parts about having OneDrive available to you, is it still looks like you have the files stored on your own computer. You're still going to go to My Documents. You're not going to have to go to the F drive or the G drive or go find it out on some website. All that you skip. It's totally invisible to the person accessing the file. And you go in there and you can grab old versions, and it keeps your stuff backed up. That computer decides to die and everything's gone. When you turn the new one on and sign into OneDrive, whoosh, it all drops right back onto the computer.
I think I just told on myself.
And it doesn't, you totally did. And it doesn't have storing stuff on the computer anymore these days has absolutely no effect on speed.
Okay.
If anybody from the service department is watching, expect a phone call immediately following this webinar.
Darrell, you're in trouble.
Right. Well, and that goes back to earlier, first slide, using the free things, right? I mean, OneDrive, up to a certain storage amount, there's no cost to that.
Right.
It's a very cost-effective way to expand your storage space. Make sure you're not needing to upgrade unnecessarily a large computer. Just, has a lot of kind of cost savings.